You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. And now for a brand new show we hope you'll like. Gene-ology, a Roddenberry podcast.
Episode 64, Encounter at Elephant Butte. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
Each week on Mission Log Gene-ology, we take a swing at Gene Roddenberry's early writing to see if we can hammer home any of the morals, meanings, and messages that link his early writing to his most famous later work, Star Trek.
But hey, Earl, you know what's up?
What?
Elephant butt.
Yeah, if that's up, I'm getting out from behind it.
Before we get to trivia for this week's episode, let me take a brief moment to encourage you to join our Patreon, or maybe follow us on YouTube, or you can even leave a review wherever you're listening to us. Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show, and let me tell you, you really want to hear that. And our private Discord as well, where you can interact with us, me and Earl, your hosts, during scheduled live chats, along with occasional screenings. You can access all of this for a mere $1 a month. So please head over to patreon.com/missionlog to see what tier works for you and join the conversation. By the way, reviews really help our shows way more than you could possibly imagine. Even if you can't come up with the words for a written review, a 5-star rating really does go a long way to tell the algorithm that you like us, you love us, you want some more of us, and that other people might like us too. We're really counting on our loyal genealogists to help spread the word. And now, this week's trivia. Earl.
According to IMDb, and all the records we've been able to source, well, most of them, Encounter at Elephant Butte was the last episode of Wrangler to air on September 15th, 1960, after the show was preempted for a week from a September 8th air date. Now, it's important to note that IMDb's cast listings are almost certainly drawn from TV guide listings or information in local newspaper TV listings pullouts, and that they, in turn, were sent information by NBC's publicity department well ahead of time. Put a pin in that because this gets interesting and maybe just a little bit complicated. Let's meet our guest stars. Robert Emhart is the show's main guest star as Mr. Crane. The son of a former mayor of Indianapolis, Indiana, Robert studied acting at Butler University and then went overseas to pursue and continue studying his craft in the 1930s. He has credits on early BBC radio productions, as well as stage productions on both sides of the Atlantic, before a run on Broadway brought him back to the States permanently. His most prominent roles on the big screen included 3:10 to Yuma, Underworld USA, and the 1974 horror film It's Alive. And his TV roles stretch back to the dawn of commercial broadcasting in the U.S., with appearances on Lux Video Theater, Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Twilight Zone, Have Gun Will Travel, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Kolchak the Night Stalker, Kojak, not the Night Stalker, and many, many others. He was frequently cast as villains, but by all accounts, he was the nicest possible guy once the director called cut. We lost Robert Emhart in 1994. Laredo was played by Robert Carricart, another actor with a long history in American film and TV. He was almost one of the stars of Rawhide, appearing in that show's pilot episode, which sold the show to its network. But before air, he was replaced by another actor with whom his scenes were reshot. And so, as far as the public knew, Robert never appeared in Rawhide. He co-starred in the Robert Loggia series T.H.E. Cat, that's Thomas Hewitt Edward Cat to you and me, as the character of Pepe Cordoza, and had a recurring role on The Untouchables as Lucky Luciano. Guest roles included The Detectives, Zane Grey Theater, One Step Beyond, and, get this, the same 2-part Have Gun Will Travel, the guest star of Robert Emhart. We lost Robert Carricart in 1993. But here's a real mystery for you. Did Encounter at Elephant Butte actually air? bear with me because this digs into some broadcast business inside baseball here. This question arises because of what we heard from John and Rod when they went to UCLA to view the Wrangler episodes, which UCLA has because the original broadcast master tapes were held by KTLA TV and donated to UCLA. And KTLA, of course, actually handled physical production of the show. That station's mobile video unit shot the location footage for Wrangler, and KTLA's video department did the studio shoots on the Paramount lot. UCLA actually holds a great many pieces of KTLA history in its archive, so the fact that Wrangler wound up in the care of the UCLA library is really more coincidence than design. Wrangler just happened to be languishing, mostly forgotten, in the KTLA tape library when it was donated for preservation and safekeeping. But when our team watched this episode, it did not appear to be finished. There were clapperboard slates. The sound mix wasn't complete. There was no Foley to fill out the sound effects, no music score had been added, and the opening titles and end credits were in a completely different place on the tape. This was not a show that was ready for prime time. Now, it's possible that a finished version of Encounter at Elephant Butte exists somewhere. After all, UCLA's online finding aid said that they had episode of The Bar M in their archives, which, at the time John and Rod went to see the episodes, was the one episode that was missing. Whereas the mysterious 7th episode, unaired according to IMDb, was completely finished, and we will be covering that script on next week's podcast. But this one, there's no way it could have aired in this unfinished state. We obtained vintage issues of TV Guide for the weeks that included both September 8th and September 15th, 1960, and found Encounter at Elephant Butte listed on both dates. The September 15th listing includes a note, postponed from last week. Interesting. Remember the fact that the KTLA tapes had clapperboard slates? John, because he knows the kind of stuff I groove on for trivia, wrote down those dates for me, just in case they were significant. The slate for the opening scene was dated August 30th, 1960, and the opening and end credits were put on tape on September 9th, 1960. So if Elephant Butte was intended to air on the 8th, which is an auspicious day for any Gene Roddenberry production, except maybe not this one, it was running just a little bit behind. So Elephant Butte was either preempted by NBC for some of their programming, possibly a news or sporting event, although we have not been able to track down what that could have been, or, and this would have been a gigantic no-no for any show on any network, Wrangler missed an air date and had to be replaced with something else on very short notice without enough time to notify TV Guide, which would have already gone to press with the credits for Elephant Butte. Now, this isn't completely Gene's fault. The scripts were written ahead of time, but when you're the producer, the buck stops with you. Or with executive producer Charles Irving, who was also overseeing other videotaped productions for Hollis Productions and Paramount at the time, including Emergency Ward. If Crisis Named Waveland was further along in the production pipeline, it would have been ready for the September 15th air date. Now, remember, from some of Gene's own various recollections of how the Menagerie two-parter came to be during Star Trek's first season, it's interesting that central to that story was that the show was over budget and behind schedule. Gene's solution in 1966 was to repurpose The Cage, Waste Not, Want Not, and have that serve as the centerpiece of a two-part episode filmed as cheaply as possible to prevent Star Trek from missing an air date. You would almost think this was someone who knew from hard experience not to miss an air date, because when you are a producer, one missed air date is an anomaly, and not a good one. 2 missed air dates looks like an alarming trend that says not very good things about your reliability. We'll dig further into my theory next week and present some more evidence when we cover A Crisis Named Waveland. But as the evidence stands right now, with the hints of a missed air date, an episode that doesn't seem to exist in a completed state, and a supposedly unbroadcast episode that does exist in a completed state, I am standing by a somewhat startling conclusion, and that is, nobody saw Encounter at Elephant Butte. It was abandoned in post-production and replaced by another episode that was easier to complete.
you're thirsty. Is that it, cowboy?
You got a water wagon back there, Crane.
You're begging now, Pitcairn? Maybe you're just coming around at that.
I'm just saying you're a fool. Men work better watered. You say you've got a contract date to meet. Unless you're torn between business and pleasure.
And if Mr. Pitcairn says just one more word, kill him.
Pitcairn is an American cowboy who rides the late 1800s western frontier, helping people in need. With a carbine in his saddle boot, Pitcairn and his horse Sam look for work and adventure in the Wild West. Prologue. August 19th, 1868. Pitcairn rides into Carthage, New Mexico, toting the sale of many head of cattle, $22,000 worth of cattle to be exact. Pitcairn rides up to his destination, the Cattleman's Hotel. He enters the lobby, which serves as a saloon and stopover for many ranchers. Pitcairn sits down with a rancher, mid-50s, prosperous looking. The rancher has his own entourage of cowboys armed with rifles around the table. The rancher pushes a bottle and empty glasses toward Pitcairn. At the bar, we see Sheriff Matthews, who you might call an off-brand serial Wyatt Earp type. He's hanging out with Dyer, a big, burly, dangerous-looking fellow who gives the sheriff an elbow, encouraging him to look over at Pitcairn's table. Back at the table, Pitcairn is explaining the price of cattle to the rancher. When I got to Abilene, the price was 9 cents. Held out for a week and got 11 cents for you. Comes to $22,000 and a few hundred. He starts pulling the cash out of his saddlebag, piling it up in front of the rancher. There's a small stirring, both with the rancher's henchgoons and with the men around the bar turning to look at the pile of cash that would make Scrooge McDuck blush. Sheriff Matthews exchanges a look with Dyer and makes his way to the table. The rancher finishes counting out Pitcairn's share, then stuffs the rest of the cash into the saddlebag. The sheriff starts to offer his assistance, but the henchgoons click some shells into their rifle chambers. The rancher tells him they're good, and then offers Pitcairn the foreman job at his ranch. But Pitcairn declines, citing the warm weather and the desire to head north to avoid it. The sheriff, rebuffed, heads back to the bar, and the rancher offers Pitcairn his hand to shake, while also turning away to say something quietly. Pitcairn, understanding what's happening, maybe, says he's going to put the money in the bank as soon as it opens. The rancher and his entourage exit. Pitcairn checks the time and pours himself another drink. Bank's not open yet, apparently. The sheriff and Dyer give another look to the men at the bar, who turn to leave. As they approach Pitcairn, he stands, tosses a silver dollar on the table, and makes to head out himself. Dyer tries to intercept him, but Pitcairn politely turns away. "Teach you to jostle a man," shouts Dyer as he slams Pitcairn into the wall. The sheriff tells Pitcairn to get. They don't take to troublemakers in Carthage. Pitcairn begins to see the truth of the situation as he looks from the sheriff to Dyer and back again. Dyer rushes him again, hollering at Pitcairn to apologize as he lands a double-fisted rabbit punch to the back. The sheriff shouts that he warned Pitcairn once already to move along home, but before Pitcairn can say Alamoraine, Dyer rushes him again from behind. Pitcairn is ready for it and is able to land a punch on Dyer right in the breadbasket. The sheriff starts to move in as Pitcairn and Dyer are having it out, but Pitcairn gets a conk on the head with the butt of a pistol, knocking him out. "You're under arrest, creating disturbance. Bartender, get Mr. Crane. Let him know I've got a new recruit." Act 1. The place is Elephant Butte Road, the old and rugged stage route from El Paso and Carthage. Pitcairn's unconscious in the back of a wagon with his ankle shackled. He's now part of a chain gang. He's hatless, his clothing is dirty from being dragged to the wagon. A seedy, thin-faced man, Wilkins, who's a guard, is sweating in the heat as he fastens another shackle around Pitcairn's other ankle. Beyond the wagon, a chain gang of 9 men of all shapes and sizes are hard at work in the punishing sun. The rocky terrain is treacherous for their work, and they are supervised under gunpoint by Mr. Crane on horseback. Crane rides in the direction of the wagon. Crane is a corpulent man whose distant relations might be Aragog and Shelob, though he has a small and gentle voice. He observes Pitcairn and praises Mr. Wilkins on their fine new specimen. They decide to have a chat and toss a bucket of water over Pitcairn. Pitcairn starts to stir, and Wilkins almost throws another bucket on him, but Crane chides him. Waste not, want not, then takes a long drink from the bucket himself. Pitcairn, now fully conscious, looks around and starts to stand, only to find he's got some new jewelry in the form of ankle bracelets. Wilkins shouts at him to get to his feet, as Pitcairn checks his pockets for cash. Of course, the cash is gone. Pitcairn shouts that he had $800 in that pocket, but Crane only complains that the sheriff charged him $7 for Pitcairn and that Pitcairn should have hidden his money better. Wilkins says, tisk tisk. Pitcairn could have bought a lot of time off his sentence if he'd had that cash, too. More's the pity. Pitcairn has gone from dazed to cold fury in record time. Take 'em off, he says, gesturing to the chains, but Crane declines. That's the price of drunken disorderly conduct. 6 months on the Elephant Butte chain gang. What fresh hell is this? There's been no trial, no judge, no jury. Wilkins tries to move Pitcairn towards the road, but he refuses. Pitcairn catches sight of Crane's shotgun and makes a move for it, but he's easily stopped with one pull on the chain. Pitcairn hits the ground well short of the gun. Crane takes a coiled, well-worn whip from his saddle and unfurls it as he turns toward Pitcairn. Tell me when to stop, he says to Pitcairn. Pitcairn gets to his feet and lunges at Crane, only to be stopped short by the chain again. He receives a lash on his exposed back, but Pitcairn, through shouting in pain, replies, You swing like a woman, Crane. Someday I'll show you how to... But Wilkins has now locked the chain to the wagon wheel, preventing further attack. Crane continues whipping Pitcairn until he's a heap on the ground. Pitcairn is semi-conscious, face down in the dirt with the chain gang nearby. Wilkins is covering them with the shotgun while Crane fastens him to the snake chain. Pitcairn rolls over in pain, beaten bloody, but he lurches to his knees to face Crane. Crane's whip arm is tired, and so is he. Pitcairn takes stock of his situation. He's chained between Mitch and Farmer, a big brute of a man with a penchant for humming, and a 20-something clean-faced farmer with a limp, respectively. They lean down wearily to hold Pitcairn's chain, keeping him in check. Crane and Wilkins trade. Wilkins takes the whip and Crane takes the rifle. Pitcairn regains his feet painfully, but is defiant in spite of his agony. He faces off against Wilkins. There's room for you on my list, too. If and I don't settle with him first, mutters Laredo, a cowboy member of the chain gang. Who said that? Crane dresses down the men, but he's met with silence. Let's see if we can get some sympathy, then. The farmer is his unlucky victim. Other members of the chain gang comply out of indifference and the harsh reality they've lived in for so long. The farmer pleads as Wilkins moves in to swing the whip. Mitch, another member of the chain gang, asks Pitcairn, what will it be? Pitcairn tells Wilkins to hold it. You win. Crane informs them that there will be no food or water until the lost time is accounted for. Oh, and hey, no hat for you, Pitcairn. Move along now. Act 2. The sun is unforgiving as the men set to their work, chipping away the rock, scooping the gravel, and coordinating their movements to accommodate the chain. It's tough work, and the farmer looks particularly bad off. Pitcairn turns slightly to see Crane eyeing him. Pitcairn sends him a look that could kill. Crane, bemused, dismounts. Pitcairn's eye catches a pickaxe. Mitch sees the look and grabs the chain, halting Pitcairn's movement. Pitcairn starts to turn on Mitch, but Mitch's eyes look upward and he sees why. Wilkins' gun is trained on Pitcairn. I see what you mean. But Mitch grabs Pitcairn by the shirt and pulls him nose to nose. Don't thank me. We're already working without water because of you. Mitch warns him not to make more trouble, but before he can respond, the farmer shouts, Watch it! The farmer lunges, throwing a rock in Pitcairn's direction. Pitcairn dodges, thinking the rock is meant for him. But then he sees the true picture. There's a rattler at Pitcairn's feet, sounding its warning. The farmer grabs the rattler by the tail and tosses it as far as he can in the other direction, chiding him to watch his feet. The Elephant Butte is known for its rattlers, also Gila monsters. Crane freaked out the last time we ran across one of those, so you best take care. The men get back to work, Crane watching all the while. Mitch sings the worst parody of I've been working on the railroad ever with working on the Elephant Butte Road. Beneath the dull roar of Mitch's karaoke, Pitcairn asks who has the keys. It's Wilkins. Laredo suggests that Pitcairn pretends that he's been broken by their circumstances. Give it a week But Pitcairn interrupts. He's leaving today. Turns out all the men have been brought here through ill-gotten means. Mitch insists that Laredo got here on purpose. He was cheating at cards. Laredo then informs Pitcairn that Mitch is a woman-beater, but Mitch claims it was a drunken accident, a fumble of the hand. Then the farmer chimes in. Even so, none of us deserve to be treated like this. But you want to know how I landed here, he asks. I had a woman pretty enough to interest the sheriff back there. The farmer continues to wax longingly about his lady, while also producing a key in the palm of his hand. The guard isn't paying close attention, he's noticed, but the farmer failed to check Crane. Laredo moves in, proclaiming, again, the retribution he's got in mind for Crane when Crane overhears. Guard! What was that? Laredo resumes his servile demeanor. Nothing. It was the new man, making trouble again. The farmer has pocketed the key in the meantime. Laredo, perhaps more desperate than cowardly, pleads with Crane for a drink of water in exchange for giving him information. Pitcairn tells Crane that he ought to give them water. Men work better watered anyway, and he's got a contract to meet. Unless, of course, Crane is torn between business and pleasure. Understanding the sentiment of his words, Crane's expression turns stony. Wilkins, if Mr. Pitcairn says one more word, kill him. Crane then turns back to Laredo. Now, you were saying you were thirsty, right? Laredo pleads with him again, offering him information. Crane then comments on the state of his boots. Dusty, and they're new. Clean them for me, Laredo. But Laredo hesitates. This isn't your average shoe shine. As Laredo kneels to clean them, Crane gives him a swift kick to the gut. Laredo whimpers onto his side, and Crane addresses the men. You'll get water when Pitcairn stops making trouble. Mitch tells Pitcairn, you've been roped, branded, and put in a corral. Now if the boss can't break you, the rest of us can. The day goes on, and the men have made good progress. Wilkins pulls up with the water wagon and stops just short of the men. One of the older members of the chain gang collapses in the heat and dehydration. Ignoring the collapsed man, Crane orders Wilkins to pull up, and he releases rivulets of water over the loose pack. While the prisoners are distracted by the water, the farmer seizes his chance. He unlocks his chain, and Pitcairn tries to restrain him. We have to do this together, but it's too late. The farmer is making a break for it. Unfortunately, his flight dislodges a rock and gets the attention of Crane and Wilkins. Crane takes aim and fires. The farmer's body rolls slowly down the hill. In the commotion, Pitcairn has removed one of the shackles and is working on the other when Crane tells him to go ahead, remove the other, and he has Wilkins take the other men away. Crane is seething with rage. He informs Pitcairn that he no longer cares about finishing the road. He only cares about finishing Pitcairn, and he's going to see just how long it takes the sun to muddle his brain into soup. As long as Pitcairn keeps working, the other men get shade and water. But if he stops, if he relents in any way, Crane will take his whip to the other men's backs. Pitcairn sets to work. He's starting to feel the effects of dehydration and the strenuous work. The men are exhausted, and many are stretched out in the shade of the water wagon. That is, except Mitch, who's standing, watching Crane. Mitch tells Crane that there was no need for him to have killed the farmer. You could have just run him down. Crane tells him to shut up, but Mitch continues. He thought Crane was just a tough boss man, working hard men who needed to be broken, but now he thinks Pitcairn has the right of it. We're not animals. We're men. Crane cracks the whip across Mitch's back. Which is why one of us men is going to break out of those chains sooner rather than later, and I'll be around when it happens, Mr. Crane, waiting for you. Mitch then turns, exposing his back to Crane. Crane glowers and then exits while the rest of the chain gang stares down Crane with hate in their eyes. Act 3. Pitcairn is really feeling it now, Mr. Crane. The sun is blazing and he's starting to sway in the heat. Crane seizes the opportunity and tells Wilkins to ready Mitch. Pitcairn tries to regain his balance and keep working, but the sun might as well be a Kamehameha bomb. The prisoners are giving Crane and Wilkins the death stare. Mitch says that Crane should at least give Pitcairn his hat. Mitch's shirt has been stripped off, ready for a beating. Crane tells Mitch what it will cost Pitcairn to save his hide. The Indians once pegged a man out in the sun. He couldn't talk, couldn't dress himself. Terrible sight. Pitcairn tries once again to rally, this time solely on pure nerve, but it's not enough. He takes a tumble, landing inches away from a hollow burrow. But, hello, who's occupying the burrow? It's a Gila monster, crouching and hissing at his unwanted visitor. Pitcairn gets an idea and feigns getting up and falling again, this time in the position that he wants, simulating unconsciousness. Wilkins gestures towards Pitcairn and Crane rides out to inspect. Pitcairn slowly, imperceptibly, moves a hand toward the burrow. "Can you hear me, Pitcairn?" hollers Crane from horseback. He doesn't answer, so Crane dismounts and inspects the scene. He gives Pitcairn's leg a kick. No movement. Crane moves in to roll Pitcairn over when Pitcairn grabs the lizard, rolls into Crane, tripping him, knocking him to the ground. He then moves to restrain Crane, holding the hissing lizard an inch from Crane's throat. Pitcairn calls out to Wilkins, "Go ahead and shoot," and then turns to Crane. "You'll be dead seconds later." Crane tells Wilkins to hold it and stay put. Pitcairn takes it a step further and tells him to drop the gun altogether. The prisoners converge on Wilkins and he tosses them the key. Mitch frees himself and advances on Wilkins, grabbing him. Laredo is next, grabbing the gun and heading for Pitcairn. He unlocks his chains and then trains the gun on Crane. Laredo tells Pitcairn to let the lizard take a good bite out of Crane. Crane pleads for his life. Instead, Pitcairn tosses the lizard as far as he can, while Laredo keeps the gun on Crane. Pitcairn tells Laredo to give him the gun, but he resists. "No, I don't think we'll risk it," Laredo says. But Pitcairn shouts him down. "That's Crane's way." Pitcairn turns to Mitch. "We're men, remember?" Mitch responds, "Been on 4 legs for so long, Pitcairn. It'll take a while to stand on 2. Mitch then offers Crane's horse to Pitcairn. "I suspect you got somewhere to be." Pitcairn sees the futility of the situation, takes the horse, and rides off while Crane pleads for him to stay. Pitcairn enters the sheriff's office, Crane's whip in hand. The sheriff, caught unaware, goes for his gun, but Pitcairn knocks it out of his hand a la Indiana Jones and puts it in his belt. Pitcairn asks for his money. $800, please and thank you. Oh, and hey, there's my hat there on the wall. I'll be taking that. The sheriff denies having it. He's put it in the bank. Pitcairn then waxes philosophical about Crane's whip. It hurt, but Crane wasn't actually good with it. And with that, Pitcairn slashes the whip across the jacket hanging on the wall, slashing a tear in the back. "All in the wrist," he says as he whips the chair next to the sheriff. The chair splinters nearly in 2 as the sheriff jumps away. "Guess I'm lucky my back only feels like that," Pitcairn says. The sheriff then gives Pitcairn's money back, but he's not done with him yet. He tells the sheriff to fetch Sam. He needs to see something. Pitcairn takes the sheriff out to the Elephant Butte Road. It's a wasteland of abandoned wagons and shackles, but no humans. Pitcairn and the sheriff have dismounted when Pitcairn cracks the whip across the sheriff's horse. The horse takes off. Then he tells the sheriff to shackle up. He needs to see something. 30 feet of snake chain and 11 miles to town, Sheriff. Have a nice walk. I think you'll get the point I'm trying to make by then. Sheriff takes a step, feeling the full weight of the situation. In this heat? You must be crazy. Pitcairn scratches Sam behind the ears. Now, we're heading northeast, right? Pitcairn and Sam ride off with the sheriff calling after him in the distance. But wait, Sam, that's not northeast, the other northeast. Boy, would you be in trouble without me, he says as they ride off in the proper direction. The end.
Very good, Ashley. Sounds like you really whipped that recap into shape.
I whipped it good.
Too soon? No.
Oh, man. Thank you, Earl. I definitely had to wrangle that one for certain.
Okay, so Pitcairn is bringing in $22,000. Am I correct?
I mean, that sounds like a lot of money to me today. I would I would not carry that around on my person.
Certainly wouldn't kick 22 grand out of bed, but let's adjust that for inflation, shall we?
Yeah,
That's 22 grand in 1869. That is over $500,000 worth of moo meat today.
Holy moly.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of steak.
Yeah, that's a very high stakes transaction.
Indeed. Indeed.
Now, with that in mind, I cannot help but think that a tavern was probably not the best place to show me the money.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the bank apparently was not open yet, but did banks back then have counting rooms?
Yeah, it seems like the place to do that with that amount of money, you lay low somewhere. And then you do this in the bank, which is presumably guarded already.
Right.
Rather than going to a random drinking hole and flashing large wads of cash in front of everybody.
Well, and the script described it as it's the cattleman's hotel. So, if nothing else, could you have not gone to a private hotel room versus, hey, let's have this out in the middle of the saloon in the lobby?
Yeah.
I mean,
this is exactly the kind of common sense idiot ball decision that I realize would have cut the entire story off at the ankles and prevented everything dramatic here from happening. And so, like Paladin occasionally does before him, it's now Pitcairn's turn to carry the idiot ball, so we have an episode. But still.
And to, maybe give Pitcairn just a little bit of credit, the sheriff is present. So you would think, the sheriff's here. This is perfectly fine. No, it was not. The sheriff and Dyer, they were indeed in, as they would say in Star Trek Prodigy, cat boots.
In cat boots, and that's why I would have to classify this situation for Pitcairn as a dire emergency.
It is indeed a dire emergency. He was even in dire straits, I'd say.
We start yeeting members of the lizard species all over the place in the latter half of the story, and for some reason I'm hearing Strong Bad saying, "Oh man, Gila monster right to the face."
I was thinking about, there was a book series that I read when I was a kid by an author named Robert Quackenbush, and if somebody ever shows me a picture of Robert Quackenbush, I will be extremely angry because in my head he's a duck with a typewriter. So, anyway, he wrote children's books in the 60s and 70s that my public library still had, and honest to God, I think they're still there in my public library, called Detective Mole. And I loved them. I thought the artwork was really interesting. Did you read Detective Mole?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you remember when Detective Mole took on the Gila Monster gang?
Yes, I do.
So in my head, the Gila Monster I'm imagining is a Gila Monster in a cowboy outfit with a 10-gallon hat and spurs, and they're stealing all the shiny things in the town. That was the whole premise of this. It was like these early reader chapter books. They're wonderful. I read them again in college when I took children's lit because I was using them in a project I did. And I was like, these are still really fun and the artwork is really neat. But thank you for actually knowing what that is, Earl. This is why you're my brother. I love it. I love that so much. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, now I'm picturing, okay, if I ever get to see this, it is not going to live up to what is playing in my head right now, which is, Pitcairn pulls his Gila monster out from under a rock and shoves it in Crane's face. And the Gila monster's wearing his own little hat, and he's just like, "Howdy, partner."
And then Strong Bad starts narrating.
Exactly. Oh, right in the face.
Right in the face.
Now, Wilkins really gets on my bad side. Of course, Wilkins is not a good guy in this episode.
No, in my head, he looks like Wormtongue, and Crane looks like evil Winston Churchill. That's how I'm imagining them.
Wilkins really gets on my bad side with one of the worst and most dishonest 5-word phrases in any language. I was just following orders.
Oh, no.
No, what that really means, Wilkins, my friend, is I chose to follow orders. I thought it was very interesting, Pitcairn going after the sheriff. He brings a whip to a gunfight and wins.
Indy could have taken a lesson from him.
Well, I just want to say, keep this in the back of your head, because it may have some bearing on one of Gene's next gigs. Might even say, it could give you a case of whiplash.
So, Earl, if I may, these guys that Pitcairn's chained up with, they don't sound like real good dudes. I mean, cheating at cards is one thing. Yes, you might be swindling folks out of a lot of money. That's not good. As soon as Mitch is revealed to be a woman beater and but I was drunk and it was an accident, I'm just like, no, you can stay out there.
Yeah, you can, tell you what, dude, you can stay in chains next to the guy who was just following orders. That's what I think.
Yeah, I wasn't real thrilled about that. How early in the day is it if Pitcairn is waiting for the bank to open and he's having himself a couple of glasses of whiskey? Does the bank not open till afternoon? Is Pitcairn just having some bourbon for breakfast? That's what I'd like to know. That's really interesting.
I think he's got some fun money on him, and he's probably being none too wise. So,
I mean, or maybe it's Saturday and they haven't invented the mimosa yet. So, or the Bloody Mary. Here we go.
Yeah, and they also haven't invented the common sense to just lay low wherever you're staying.
Mm-hmm.
And, not show money to anyone until it's time to go to the bank and do that. I'm sorry, I'm dying on that hill. Yeah,
no, none of this was wise. I did have another observation, Earl, that I failed to mention earlier. The script calls the punch that Dyer lands on Pitcairn a double-fisted rabbit punch. Is this what we commonly know as the Kirk two-handed punch?
No, that's the double-fisted hammer blow.
Oh, excuse me.
I would think a double-fisted rabbit punch would be almost like, you ever try to give your cat's belly rubs and they give you bunny feet?
Oh, yes.
I would think it's kind of like that. Like it's quick action.
I gotcha. So Pitcairn's the speed bag. Got it.
Yeah, it's pick an internal organ, same organ, and just go after it real fast.
Got it. Working on your precision. Got it. Okay, cool. Pretty much everyone here is horrible.
Yeah, even the guys that Pitcairn is trying to get in line behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, I mean, we've already mentioned, we've got one confessed wife beater in the bunch. Great, he can go pound rocks. And fortunately, that's what they're already doing.
I would say he's quite literally doing that here. Got it.
Yeah, so, hey, instant wish fulfillment.
Hey.
But some of these guys, and I have some thoughts on this later, they are missing an opportunity to form a united front.
Yeah.
That I feel like could have ended this situation a hell of a lot sooner than it did.
Truly.
But of course, that's how you stretch this. Again, we have a very simple dilemma here. As much as we're joking about, okay, they could have just waited and then gone to the bank and done the transaction there. This kind of falls under the same thing. If these guys join together and turn against their captors, the show's over. Show's over at like 16 minutes. And I understand you have to get it to play out to whatever, 27, 28 minutes, whatever the runtime of a Wrangler episode was, leaving time open for commercials. I understand you have to stretch that out, but it feels like, okay, if we're having to stretch something to just fill the half hour, we're in trouble already. I think Pitcairn should cut Sam some slack at the very end. He's giving him directions like Sam doesn't know where to go. It's like, dude, at least he's getting you out of there. Actually, it feels like there is some stuff to unpack here. I think we already noticed the plot is kind of simple.
It is kind of simple. And thinking about the ending, the way this ends, I got hints of both the posse and the return of Roy Carter. I don't know about you.
Yeah, a little bit. Really kind of more the posse. Yeah, I got bigger posse vibes from A Time for Hanging. but I can definitely see where you're coming from with this. The situation is not quite resolved, but our hero rides away anyway. Feel that we have here. I wonder if the plotting is kept really simple to focus on whatever point Gene might be trying to make here. And this is a Gene script. And I think there is a point to it. I kind of want to hear what you found here and see if we kind of landed anywhere in the same space. Hopefully not under a rock with a Gila monster.
Yes. Or with a rattler at her feet. I wouldn't be interested in either one of those things.
Well, you can just yeet that. I mean...
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of yeeting going on. Whole lot of yeeting going on.
A lot of airborne lizards. Yeah, more airborne lizards in this show than you really get in most non-high fantasy shows.
Truly. We're like one short of Game of Thrones right now. Anyway, Earl, I could not get over how brutal these men were being treated. I got issues with Mr. Wife Beater dude, but these guys are here without a trial. They were not properly served. Justice was not done. Something as mild as drunk and disorderly gets you 6 months on the chain gang without trial or judge or jury.
Well, I took note of a line that Pitcairn said to Crane. He said, I haven't even stood before a judge, but I suspect you know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning, he knows the fix is in.
Yeah. So this is definitely some sort of racket that the sheriff and Crane have got going, and sounds like the whole ding-dang town's in on it, so that's not cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the sheriff, we've got Crane, we've got Dyer.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Wilkins out here being Crane's strongman.
Mm-hmm.
We're already running into an unwieldy number of people here, so... The thing I always laugh about with people alleging that huge, sprawling conspiracies exist is, you've never done any kind of project management, have you? You get more than 3 or 4 people into a room, somebody's blabbing about something, somewhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'd seen chain gangs in, movies and TV and things like that, but reading this script really, I mean, if you'll forgive the expression, really gave me the full weight of what that might be like. And as someone who lives in the South and absolutely hates being hot, I'm miserable the whole time I'm reading this script. I'm cold today, but I feel like I should be sweating along with these guys. Because they're in this punishing heat. Sunscreen has not been invented yet, to my knowledge. And at minimum, Pitcairn, poor guy, didn't even have a hat. As somebody who's extremely pale and will burn in 5 seconds or less... and I've never even been to New Mexico. I don't want to go. It's too dang hot.
Oh, but it's a dry heat. That's what everyone in that part of the country. You know what else is a dry heat? My oven. No, thank you. Yeah. We heard from John and Rod whenever we started this journey with Wrangler that some of the stuff that was shot on location apparently looked really spectacular.
Cool.
Because... they were doing things like crane shots, and you have all the crispness of well-preserved video. Mm-hmm. So it apparently looked really impressive. I wonder if this is one of those. I mean, did they make these guys look sweaty? Did we forget to do that? And the funny thing is, I mean, if you're out there filming in this location, the sun's right there. You're probably not too far from the reality of the scene.
Yeah. Now, you are sweating right along with these actors. The sweat is real. None of the oily fake sweat required.
Yeah, so I have to imagine this was not a huge amount of fun to shoot.
No.
So, I have lots of questions about what it looks like, what condition, how far along the production cycle was it before, at least what UCLA has was abandoned in place, because... This seems like one you wouldn't want to lose after going through all that effort.
I have to wonder, too, because, it sounds like there may be some issues with post-production. How did the equipment hold up in that heat?
Probably not too well.
Yeah. I have to wonder if there was, some damaged tape or something.
I can tell you that from having worked in broadcast live trucks, admittedly of a much later vintage, all that equipment back there puts off heat. What I was working with in the 90s was we were probably one of the last stations in the country still using 3/4-inch U-matic tape, which was a Sony video cassette, which it was a broadcast video cassette, so way bigger than VHS, but it was all self-contained. With Wrangler, they were using these 2-inch quad things that weighed a ton and had a lot more very analog guts in them. Had to put out a huge amount of heat. And even if you're like blowing fans in there, not for the sake of the people using the equipment, the fans are there for the equipment.
Right.
Yeah, I once worked in a TV control room that was kept meat locker cold, and it's like, wow. Why am I having to bring a sweater to wear in July? It's like, no, we don't care about you. The equipment is a lot more expensive than you, and we have to keep it cool. And that was literally what I was told. Well, thanks.
Oh, cool. Good to know.
So I can't imagine the equipment fared very well either. But I have many more thoughts about that we will cover in next week's show as we kind of start to get on the off-ramp from Wrangler. Because we have found some first-hand accounts that indicate making this show was not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
Except maybe Sam.
Sam probably got out okay. Earl, I mentioned a little earlier that I feel like we got a bit of a flavor for the posse and the return of Roy Carter in the finale of this episode. Pitcairn's left with vigilante justice is about to be enacted. Is it earned? Maybe, but it's still vigilante justice. There's still no judge. There's still no jury, no trial.
How fair a trial do you think he's going to get when the sheriff is so obviously corrupt?
Exactly. I mean, that's the issue, isn't it?
The law has already failed to be upheld in this town.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't sit around waiting for the law to clear it up, unfortunately. And that's what you're left with. Yeah. Now, I don't think it is an unsurvivable situation for the sheriff. It's a very unpleasant one.
Mm-hmm.
He's been given the same chance that Pitcairn was given.
To me, though, it still felt, and again, this is me talking as somebody who absolutely hates hot weather. I live in the wrong place for that. I'm feeling bad for the guy. Not saying that he didn't have it coming. But I feel like there's a good chance that guy's going to get keeled over trying to get back to town, dragging that 30-foot snake chain by himself. It's one thing where you got, 9 guys pulling it together. At least you can move together.
Yeah.
And I get what Pitcairn's trying to do. And so in one sense it feels just, but it doesn't sit right with me because, again, there's no judge, there's no jury, but you are right. There's no judge or jury that's going to, do right by these people in Carthage, New Mexico, apparently. Carthage, New Mexico is the wretched hive of scum and villainy that Moss Isley aspires to be, apparently.
The other worrisome part about this is, do you think the sheriff changes his ways after he gets back to the safety of town eventually?
I have to think he's hoping somebody rides past and finds him and helps him out. And then, Pitcairn better make tracks real quick. He and Sam better get out of Dodge. Get out of Carthage.
Go to Dodge. Stay in Dodge.
Is that northeast of Carthage? I don't know. I'm geographically challenged. I don't know that he's going to... he's going to feel something all right, but is he going to learn the lesson? I don't know. It's people
Would be interesting to watch the episode and make a note of what speed Sam is making getting out of there.
Yeah.
I think that will... as you've said, you are going to get to see these soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would be interested in hearing, does Sam make a leisurely exit from Elephant Butte Road,
mm-hmm.
Which we join already in progress, or it is Pitcairn let's get the hell out of here?
I suppose we'll have to have a big heaping cup of watch and find out. The ending does not sit right with me because it's not heroic. Is it retribution? Yes. Is it just? I mean, it's about as just as it's going to get, but I still don't like it. This is not how I want my heroes to operate.
I would make the following suggestion that it doesn't really have anything to do with the ending, but has to do with all of the chain gang imagery here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whips, the shackles, the snake chain, all of that. Gene is not being even remotely subtle in hearkening back to something that had just been outlawed a few years prior to the late 1860s time frame where Wrangler takes place.
Yep.
Really, what this is about is slavery. Mm-hmm. And about slaves fighting back against their oppressors. Now, we've said it before, 1960, when Wrangler aired, is right smack in the middle of the civil rights movement. But by couching this in terms of a Western, cast with, I'm sure, a bunch of white guys, that is something I'm assuming. You'll have to let me know what the boots on the ground truth is. I would be stunned if there is a single person of color in this show.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, really, any episode. But by doing this as a Western with a non-ethnic cast, Gene is taking this message of fighting for equality. He's kind of slipping it under the radar. Because on screen it may be about a bunch of white men in a chain gang, but I don't think that's what the story is really about. You know, it is about inequality. It's a very oversimplified version, but what you have in this town, in Carthage, is systemic inequality. The whole system is tilted against you if you come in from out of town and make the misfortune of making it known that you've got a lump of cash in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
But because it is played out by a bunch of white guys on TV, Paramount and Hollis Productions and NBC aren't even going to blink.
Yeah.
And to be fair, a lot of folks probably didn't get the hint either. But those who are in the fight or are aware of the fight in real time, they probably got it.
Yeah.
And so I think we're dealing with Sneaky Gene here, and Sneaky Gene is my favorite Gene.
Sneaky Gene. All right, Earl. This is the sound of two podcasters talking about the chain gang. I love what you've pointed out here, that the brutality shown here, the lack of justice, the dehumanization that these guys are experiencing is a disgustingly accurate metaphor for what would have been just illegalized in the time in which the show is set. And yet, the remnants of that, the injustice, the beatings that are happening on this show, were still happening in places in the United States in the time in which this was aired.
Yeah, and still have people at least verbally arguing about it now. You know, to our national shame. Or at least it damn well should be.
It should be, and it is. Whether people want to agree with me or not, sorry, it is. Actually, I'm not sorry about that at all, so I take that back. This was such a hard episode to read. I think that was part of the reason I was struggling with this. Is like, oh my gosh, this just keeps getting worse. And while I love horror movies and I'll watch horror movies all day, and very rarely do they bother me, because I know it's just a movie. It doesn't, you know, for whatever reason it hits differently. Because like some of the movies that scare me the most are the most realistic ones. Like I can't watch Deliverance ever again. That's way too realistic and horrifying. I get that same kind of feeling when I'm reading this script for Elephant Butte.
I wonder how much of this actually made it to the screen the way Gene is describing on the page. Have you thought about that? That it may have gotten watered down for a variety of reasons. You know, maybe someone
Sure.
at the network did twig as to what it was saying and was like, oh, tone it way down.
Yeah.
Or, you know, they may have gotten out there somewhere on location and said, okay, we're really going to have to go easy on this because it is actually freaking hot out here. And, you know, we are actually going to have people dropping if we try to act this out.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's even a remote possibility that and yet, because of what the script is actually saying, what it is actually sneaking in between the lines, I kind of hope not. I kind of hope this hit the screen with the brutality intact, as much as they were going to let on the screen in 1960, because of the point it is making.
It serves a narrative function. It's not there to be horrific. I mean, it's there to be horrific, but it's horrific with a purpose. It's not part of the reason I love David Cronenberg, besides that, you know, he's Kovich on Discovery, is that I love his films because, while yes, they are some of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life, everything that is disgusting on screen in a David Cronenberg film serves a narrative function, and the point that he's trying to make would be lessened if it was not that disgusting and gross and terrifying. I feel that same feel when I read Elephant Butte.
Yeah. And I think there are very clear messages in this one. How about you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You want to tell our friends at home what do you think some of these messages are?
Well, here's something that Crane says. I don't think this is what the message is, but boy, does the man want you to think this is what the message is. All the Mr. Cranes out there. Object lesson, my friend. You are all alone. Crane's divide and conquer tactics do seem awfully familiar. Telling everyone that they're not getting water or shelter because of Pitcairn. Let's see, what does that remind me of? Oh yeah, telling decent, hardworking people that some other group of people, whether they are from far-flung places on the planet, or they are economically disadvantaged, or whoever, implying that these people are not also decent and hardworking themselves. They're here to take our jobs, or our money, or they're taking food out of our mouths. And that's not actually what's happening. The imbalance has been set in motion from the top down, not from the bottom up. Whether it's on a macro scale or a micro scale, like in this story, someone like Crane only stays on top of the heap by force. And Pitcairn rightly points out several times that he and his fellow workers could succeed by presenting a united front rather than falling for all this dividing rhetoric. Once Mitch is standing with Pitcairn, it's much easier for the other guys to stand with both of them. It has to start with one standing up, and then another standing with them, and then you have the beginnings of a group. Then more people join the group, and then it's what, a union? An army? What is it? It's awfully dangerous if it's pissed off. That makes it a mob. And, you know, that is what this group of men initially is, and Pitcairn has to rein in some of their worst impulses there as well. But the tables are now turned, the wheel has turned, and it's pointing at Mr. Crane. All tyranny does is it starts the countdown to an uprising that unseats the tyrant. This is one of the oldest lessons in human history, and sadly, it's one that we keep having to relearn because somebody is always going to get drunk on the taste of power. So it falls to us to relearn it as well. Stand up, rise up, resist. And I would say that is the very obvious moral meaning and message here. And yes, it is told brutally, if the script is anything to go by, but much like the swift change in the chain gang's attitude after the escaping farmer is gunned down, sometimes people have to be shocked into action. It's a pity that shock to the system requires someone to die in this story, but sometimes that is the catalyst, as it is here.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Earl, we have to look not that far back into our own history to see examples of that here in the U.S. And it's horrible that it takes that.
It's horrible that it keeps taking that.
Yeah. This should not still be happening. But Earl, I think you have nailed it home, my friend. This is sadly a lesson that we keep having to repeat. Yeah. Friends, if you're listening, consider it. Take it to heart.
Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory Players. Our cast this week featured Cody Banning as Pitcairn and Shane Sexton as Mr. Crane. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at MissionLogPod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
On the next Gene-ology, a crisis named Waveland.
Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.